Well, we're here. In case you guys weren't aware, right there on the bottom. Probably around the first time, if ever, if I've like actually wanted to commit to the name or the title that was The Professor. If there's going to be any stream to point to and say, like, hey, well, this guy knows what he's talking about, it's probably going to be this one. So I got some information. More importantly, I got some advice for Lamar and for the fans. Just going to throw my 2 cents out there, but it's not going to be all that pleasant if you're going against my advice. Now, I will say, now that we have some people here, I'm going to put this ticker down here at the bottom and be like, hey, I'm not going to address these comments right away. You might stick around. You might still be here. But I have like over a dozen bullet points that I want to cover. And I'm not going to get doing, and I'm not going to get done with it in time if I keep having to stop and address everything, clarify. So maybe at the end, if I have enough time in order to take care of all that, I can deal with that later. But for right now, I got a lot of stuff to get to. I have to just empty everything about this problem. And yes, I said it's a problem. I have to dump everything onto this stream so that I don't have to talk about it. We don't have to address it on the channel ever again, because quite honestly, it's sickening. So, as we begin here, right? One thing that I got to address first is I got to tell you something about myself, because there's a lesson that I've learned a couple years ago that I think Lamar needs to learn right now. So, just a little backstory. If you guys are new to me, if you guys are just tuning in, or if you guys are already familiar with you, then you should probably already know some things. But I'm going to add a couple of more details in here because they're pretty relevant to what we're going to be talking about. So, I graduated high school in 2017. A couple months later, I got my first job as an after-school program teacher. Right? I wasn't even 18 years old yet, and I took care of a classroom. It was kind of mind-boggling that they would just like let me do that in like August or September when I graduated in June or July. But they trusted me with the job. I trusted them. And soon enough, I had my own classroom to take care of. Now, you may be wondering, it's like, hey, well, aren't the after-school teachers the kind of daycare people where like the parents will just drop off the kids and just let them deal with them for a couple of hours? Yeah, you're exactly right. You're almost too spot on, which is why we didn't get a whole lot of credit. We didn't get a whole lot of leadership roles. But what we did was that we showed kids what taking the lead was, what taking the lead meant, what taking the lead looked like. And it was my job to do that. And I did that job for a year and a half. Now, one of the reasons as to why I got into that job in the first place was because I like to teach. I like to show people something that they may not have already known. And I like to show them in the best way that might suit them, right? So when we're in this YouTube setting, there's only one way to see it, and that's visually. So I can't give you a whole lot of visual stuff, but I have to at least stand up and start moving around because I just can't take this anymore. I just can't deal with this right now. Okay? There's no one else here. There's not going to be anyone else. I didn't invite anyone else to show up because I just want to have a conversation, a one-on-one between me and you, the viewer. That way we can get this done as fast as possible and take care of this. Just nip it in the bud. All right? So I got that job. I had it for a year and a half. And over the course of that time, I had to go through different schools. I had to go through different types of classes. I had to go through different grades, and they all had the similar kind of problem where it's like they didn't take that job seriously. So you have to try your absolute hardest to make them care about you as the teacher. And with when you're a regular teacher, right, like you actually have consequences when people try to disobey you. You can actually do something to them. But when you're an after school teacher, there's almost no repercussions if you know that you can go home early. There's almost nothing that a teacher could do at that point. So to certain people, there was almost no reason to actually go along with whatever you're selling. But the fact is that I went through every classroom. I was there for either a day, a week, a month, or half the semester. It didn't matter. That classroom listened to me. Because I made them care. You know how I made them care? Because I showed them that I cared about them. I showed them what taking the lead was, because that was a part of the job description. It wasn't anything else. It wasn't like, oh, well, you just got to sit down and do their homework. You just got to sit down and read to them. You just got to sit down and play with them. There was elements to that, absolutely. But the thing is that those kids needed direction, because some of them weren't getting that at home. Some of those kids needed a role model. Some of those kids, I became their role model. And I wasn't even there for that long. But that's just how impressionable some of these people are. That's just how fickle their minds can be when they go completely rebellious to one person, but then completely loyal to another. But there came a certain time, like I said, only a year and a half, so I had to leave at some point. And that was actually pretty tough for me, because like I said, when you show them that you can consistently care and lets them know that, hey, I can stick with you. One, I can trust you. I have confidence in you. I know that I can be safe around you. And when you leave as the teacher, you're not guaranteed to give them that next person that can treat them the same way. Because the last classroom that I had that for a half a semester. The year before, they were the ones that was the most rebellious ones. Like, they were like the quote unquote bad students. And I knew that because the previous 4 teachers that they had quit, and it was because of them. So even after a half a year, or even after a whole year, I still wasn't really considered like the top one, but I wanted to make sure that that class still respected me. And a couple months later, that became the best behaved class in this entire school. Okay, I don't do this because it's my job. I don't do this because I'm getting paid for it. I'm doing it because it's my passion. And some of them, they already had to ask those questions. It's like, hey, well, how much money do you make from this? It's like, well, I'm not really able to tell them. But then, like, after hours, I tell them, it's like, dude, I made $10.50 here. Okay, I'm not doing this for the money. I made $10.50 an hour, and it was a part-time job, so I barely made anything. Okay, but again, I wasn't in there for that. I was in there to show off my passion. So I was able to sacrifice some of my power. I was able to sacrifice some of my own ego and take a lesser role if it meant that I would do what I loved. But there comes a time where inflation happens, right? Some of your bills get bigger. Some of your family cares get larger. And I couldn't live with $10.50 an hour. So I had to make that decision. And I thought that by doing that was the best way, in order to just, oh, hey, let's just find another job. Like, let's just find a job while I have the job. That's typically what people say. And when you have the job, you try to find the job, you want to try to make that as smooth of a transition as possible. So that's what I was trying to do. I gave them a 6-week notice, right? Some people don't even give them a 2-week notice because they think it's a farce. I gave that classroom, and I gave everyone else 6 weeks to determine that, hey, I'm not going to be here at the end of the semester. Those 6 weeks, those kids became the best behaved class because they knew that they were going to miss me. They knew that I was going to miss them. But what came down to it from a business standpoint was that I said no to them first. Right? I told them, the people that I was working with, that, hey, I'm not going to be here anymore. I have to move on. And I thought that that was going to better my standing. I thought that was going to better my next chance of getting another job. And it did, but it took me 7 months to find another one because I said no to them. I didn't get what I wanted. And I was practicing, and I was doing that for months in order to train, in order to get what I thought that I deserved. And I still didn't get it right away. I still had to wait over half the year in order to find my next one. So even at 19 years old, I got my next job. And I was there for 3 years. And I even announced on stream in front of some of y'all that I quit. For a second time, I said no to another business. And I said that no, I was not going to be here, even though that at that place, we had to be there together. It was not the same kind of job, but it was a team effort, right? We're all coworkers. We're all teammates, essentially, in order to get through the day. So when you take care of your team and when you take care of all your responsibilities as a teammate or as a coworker, and you sometimes go above and beyond that, and you sometimes have to make your own sacrifices, right? Because I showed up to work when I was sick. I showed up to work when I was injured. I showed up to work after I had bike crashes and scooter crashes. I showed up to work when I was drunk and hungover the following night. I showed up to work in all those conditions. Because I did it for them. Because I knew that if I didn't show up to work, even if I was at like 10% of myself, even if I was at 20%, even if I felt like I was going to throw up on the job, I still showed up because that 10% of me is better than 0% of me. Even just the 10% of me, they can work with that. And I gave them the confidence that, yes, I was in fact giving it my all. Yes, I was in fact putting my body on the line out there in front of them. And at some points, they appreciated it. At some points, they said it wasn't enough. And when it got to the point where I kept hearing that it wasn't enough, that it wasn't enough, that it wasn't enough, I no longer felt like I was a teammate. And so I decided to say no to them. And then a couple of months happened after that. I thought that in between the fact that I was going to say no to them, that I was going to have that same transition, that I thought that I was going to get and go somewhere where I deserved to be. Because, hey, my hard work in the last 3 years and my hard work in the previous 4.5 years, it showed that I cared about being a part of a team. That it showed that I cared about my leadership mentality. That it showed that I cared about everything else that was around me. And I was doing it for other people. So even in those moments where I didn't have a job and I couldn't get unemployment, because sometimes the funny thing is that you don't get unemployment benefits when you quit. So I had to do that. I had to do my streams. I had to, take care of the family situation at home. I had COVID during that time, and I was still trying to find a job. And I did. And that's where I'm at right now. And that's where I've been since August. And even then, sometimes you can end up going into the same situations. But when you're experienced and when you've been at a certain spot enough times, you got to understand, okay, well, here's the new cycle. Here's the cycle of understanding. So where does this pertain to Lamar? All right, because I am trying to give some advice to Lamar here. That's the whole purpose of me having the stream. So where does this information coincide with Lamar? Well, I'll tell you what. Because when Lamar Jackson was drafted by the Ravens in 2018, I had my job at that point too. Following year, he ends up becoming a starter, a full-time starter, goes all 15 games. Unanimous MVP. First time that ever happened to a black quarterback, by the way. So congratulations on that. But then the following couple of years, you started to realize that, hey, there's maybe a trend after a couple of years have passed, right? About 3 years. And now he's in a situation where he's wanting to ask, hey, I think I'm worth this much. And I deserve this much. And I'm going to go, before I leave the tunnel, I'm going to go to a fan and I'm going to hold my own sign that says to pay me because I deserve this much. And I'm going to go on Twitter and say all this sorts of stuff And what did he say, right? What did he say back on March 2nd? He said that he requested a trade. So guess what that means in layman's terms? He said no. And you don't get the benefits right away of saying no to a business like this. You don't get everything that you want when you have to say no to them first, right? You work under their tutelage. They don't work for you. And even now, you're trying to go past this. And you're trying to do it by yourself. Which, okay, sometimes not the worst thing in the world. You know, you have one of your own teammates, doesn't have an agent. He's another black guy. And he also got a contract by the Ravens, an extension. And that was Roquan Smith. So there's a couple of extra things that we can focus on here. But let's take a look at something else here, right? Because that was the whole point, right? You said no. When you say no, it's no longer in your own control to determine what happens next. And then this is his strategy, which just baffles me. He's trying to use his talent on the field in order to overcome the business side of things, right? He thinks that he is more talented than anyone else. And so that alone is his foot in the door to get past all these other business discussions, to get past all these contract negotiations. And he, like I said, he wants to do it on his own, which at some point you just got to admire the stubbornness. So what happens from here, right? Well, we can take a look at the past examples, right? We can take a look at some of his former teammates. We can take a look at some other people that happened to do the same thing a couple years back, right? We think about Melvin Gordon with his contract holdout. What happened to that, right? He thought he was more talented and thought that he could overcome the business side of things with the Chargers. And then he ended up having to wait, hold out, and it got a worse contract offer with the Broncos. Same thing actually kind of recently happened with Dalton Schultz, the new Texans tight end. He declined a bigger contract than what he ended up signing for over there. And you want to talk about another a Ravens teammate of his, of Lamar's? Le'Veon Bell. What happened to him by the time that he was having to do this holdout and all this, oh, I'm not going to play for you because I'm not going to play for you people because I'm too talented for you to so you need to start missing me, right? Then, and here's the kicker, right? He thought that he won. He thought that he got what he wanted when he signed with the Jets. But then he failed that end of the bargain on the field, by the way, which that was his main leverage. He thought that he was so good that he could overcome that. And now we have Lamar that's trying to do the same thing. And all the while, right? All the while, we have one question. Right? Because how does this pertain to us, right? Like, oh, so far we've been talking about myself. So far we've been talking about the Ravens. We've been talking about this. And so why do I have this question up here? Right? Because there's one thing that correlates to us right now with the Ravens and the Falcons. There's one thing, right? And that is the fact that we got the best leader in the locker room from last year that played in Baltimore, the man that's going to give us such a good impact on the field, but also a phenomenal impact off the field. Ladies and gentlemen, the best guy in the locker room for the Ravens is now here, and his name is Calais Campbell. And I know that eats you up inside, Lamar fans, but it's true. All this time, Lamar has been so concerned about his own self and his own needs and his own desires that he hasn't really thought about his other teammates that much, right? And he has to try to defend his leadership, which as a leader and as a former person that was taking the lead, that's not something that you have to defend. That's something that other people defend for you, if that is really true. So if I ever got a concern when I was a teacher and be like, hey, I don't know if he's holding the classroom really well, do they ask me or do they ask my students? They would most likely ask my students. And then you get their answer. You don't get your own answer. Your own answer could be your own opinion. That could be your own perspective. You may think that you're doing so well, but in reality, let's just face it, we've seen more comments about Desmond Ritter's leadership recently than Lamar Jackson's. And we were talking about how important this quarterback position is, right? How valuable it can be to a team in order to get it right. But that is the leader of the locker room. That is, without a doubt, the leader of the locker room. And if you have too many people that are trying to be the leaders of the locker room, it starts to have a divide. There starts to be that question of, okay, well, who is actually the leader? Who should we actually follow under? So, kind of leads the question, right? And now, let's focus on another person. If we want to go into the financial discussions, right, there's no way that we can do this without having to talk about Deshaun Watson. So, if I have to do another recap of this, then I guess I got no choice but to do it. So, once all the allegations happened, once he suspended basically himself for 1 year and then got suspended another year, we got down to the conversations about, okay, well, what is Deshaun Watson worth? And truthfully, there wasn't a whole lot of actual truth that was being spread in the media. There was a lot of things that were saying, oh, hey, well, now you have this team in the league. Well, now you have this team in the league, and now you have this team in the league. It's not the freaking Kentucky Derby, guys. It's a contract negotiation with a lot of people that are shutting their mouths about this because they understand the importance of it, especially for the league moving forward. So, Deshaun gets his money, and he gets it from the Cleveland Browns, but that's not without mentioning our name into the fold, right? Because as Drew from Drew Talk Sports mentioned last night on the Heavy Hitters, right? Deshaun has a history with the Falcons, right? As to reiterate what Drew was saying on the previous stream, basically he grew up in a house with a single mother, kind of like myself, but he grew up in a house that was given to him by Work Done, former Falcon. He was a ball boy for the practices at the Falcons. So he had the rapport with Arthur Blank, but he also had the rapport with Matt Ryan. And even in previous interviews, Deshaun Watson had said how well he was able to coach Deshaun Watson. Right? Deshaun said that himself. Like, hey, I appreciate all that Matt has done for me in order to help me become an NFL quarterback. So all this discussion about, oh, hey, well, is Deshaun Watson this? Is Deshaun Watson this? Or is Lamar this? Is Lamar that? Right? There's now the comparison between them as far as like on the field activity. And sometimes some of these numbers, mostly all of them, they actually favor Deshaun. At least in the passing categories, right? So we can talk about him, but we can also talk about the other Ravens quarterback, right? The one that Lamar actually had to replace. And that was Joe Flacco. So Flacco actually has an interesting role in this as well, because Flacco was the last time in which the Ravens actually gave a large extension to their quarterback. Back in 2013, after he became Super Bowl MVP. You want to talk about regular season MVP? Heck, even Matt Ryan could do that. Some of you guys don't like the fact that that is something I can say, truthfully. But, oh, well, we got to cherish Lamar, right? We got to do all this. But then Joe Flacco, on the other hand, actually gave them their second Super Bowl ring. And he played a heavy part in that. It's crazy because Lamar Jackson couldn't even beat Phillip Rivers in the playoffs. Lamar Jackson almost struggled to beat Ryan Tannehill and Derek Henry in the playoffs. Lamar Jackson had struggled to beat or even put up more than 3 points against the Bills. And sometimes he's not even on the field for them at all when it comes to the playoffs. So when you compare the two, right, like you can reset the market with a guy that actually gave you the Super Bowl trophy. Or we can reset the market with a guy that's 1-4 in the postseason. Right? When you got to think about all this stuff, right? You got to think about all the on-field stuff. Right? When you got to think about all the on-field stuff, you start taking a look at, okay, well, what has he done for me lately? And lately, he wasn't on the field. Even when you consider the fact that he wasn't on the field, right? Someone else had to take over for him, obviously. Someone else had to be the quarterback. Someone else had to take that same kind of role and do something about it. Why don't you know it? The backup for Lamar Jackson happens to be Tyler Huntley. And even back in 2019, even back then, when he couldn't finish the season, more like when he got benched, that's what I'll say for that. But, and it's kind of crazy how I could say that he got benched in the final game against the Steelers and then took the other week off and then decided to score 12 points. Okay, that's neither here nor there yet. But, yeah, you had molds of you that was right behind you. Okay, we know how good that RG3 was back in the day. What about Tyler Huntley? What happened to him? Oh, what was that? He found his way to the Pro Bowl last season? But I thought that Lamar didn't have any weapons. But I thought that Lamar was going to be so phenomenal in that state where that no one else was going to be close to him. How do you mean to tell me that Tyler Huntley somehow, as a substitute, mind you, but yeah, he somehow got his way into the Pro Bowl? Not only that, but when it came down to the precision passing, right? When it came down to, oh, hey, I'm going to, chuck these passes over here and hit those targets, Tyler Huntley was the second best thrower. Okay, but he's the watered down, great value version of Lamar. That he will never be able to touch that, and I can understand some of that. But the point is that some of you guys don't like the fact that I can say that. And so now we have this, right? Now we have Joe Flacco that was here that had that big contract, that had that extension that was like a 7-year, $136 million contract or whatever, didn't live up to it. Completely did not live up to it. That was the whole purpose they got Lamar in 2018. It's like, hey, wait a minute. What the heck? This guy's acting stale. All he wants to do is go ahead and start checking down. Now they got Lamar, someone else that wanted to shine early on, give him the individual success. And then when it came down to it, hey, now I want the extension. Now I want 5 years, most of it guaranteed. I don't want to accidentally, quote unquote, break the bank, but I do want more than Deshaun Watson as far as guaranteed money for the 4 years. You realize that by the end of that 5-year contract, this man is going to be 31 years old? And you're okay with what you've seen in the past in order to produce all of that stuff? So let's just go ahead and talk about Lamar's MVP season, right? If we want to go ahead and say, right, if the fans want to go ahead and say, but he was an MVP in 2019. Okay. You can say that. You can say that truthfully. But for just a moment, I want to peek behind the curtain a little bit. I want to know what was involved in that 2019 season. What made him get that award? That individual award, by the way. It doesn't say most valuable teammate. It just says most valuable player. So let's take a look at the player himself, right? So, did you know that Mark Andrews, the guy in which he was quote unquote no weapons, the guy that was like, I mean, he just made a Pro Bowl last year too. Like not too long ago, he was an All-Pro. He made 3 Pro Bowls in 5 years so far. But he's got no, okay. Well, anyways, Mark Andrews in that 2019 season, he actually was responsible for 25% of Lamar's passing numbers that year. You want to talk about he doesn't have any weapons. Does he really distribute the ball that well enough in order to have it, in order to justify having another weapon? When one man is basically 25% of the offense? Okay. So that's passing stuff, but he got it for his rushing stats, right? Lamar was incredible. He was absurd in his rushing stats, right? No one else could do that on the Ravens, right? Let's remove the rushing yards that Lamar had in that 2019 season. Did you know that removing 1,206 rushing yards that Lamar had in 2019 will still give the Ravens over 2,000 yards on the ground? Yeah, you can take out all of Lamar's stuff on the ground, and they will still have nearly 2,100 yards rushing. But yeah, nobody else could do it like him, by the way. Okay. Did you know that the Ravens had 156 more rushing attempts than passing attempts? I can explain that a little bit later. But did you know that the Ravens that year in passing were dead last in passing attempts? Okay, I digress. Did you know that Lamar Jackson's 36 touchdowns, was it? 16 of those were for 10 yards or fewer? Sounds pretty manufactured if you ask me. Speaking of manufactured, did you know that when you take a look at Lamar Jackson's RPO and play action plays, right, which he had quite a few of them, that actually amounted just those types of plays, right? It wasn't like your standard concepts, right? So when the Ravens were threatening the run, but then chose to pass afterwards, that actually made up 47% of Lamar's passing numbers. So 25% of the offense was 25% of the passing offense was Mark Andrews. 47% of the offense of the passing offense was just faking the run. Most of that offense, because they were number 1 in rushing attempts, they were number 1 in yards on the ground. Most of that was on the ground. And even if you take out Lamar Jackson's actual stats in that category where he specialized in, he wasn't even the leading guy in yards from scrimmage. Ravens were also 27th in passing that year. Okay, that's bottom 5, in case you didn't know. Just a quick little tidbit. The Ravens also had 6 defensive touchdowns that year, and some of those was just straight up responsible for winning games. But here's the other thing, right? But it was Greg Roman's fault. It was all Greg Roman. Greg Roman was responsible for all those numbers. That's why he looks so bad. Let me tell you why Greg Roman was hired, okay? Here's Greg Roman by the numbers, okay? So in Greg Roman's 10 years as an offensive coordinator, there was not a single time where his rushing offenses dipped out of the top 10. So that was true in San Francisco back when he had Kaepernick. That was true back in 2015, 2016 when he had Tyrod Taylor in Buffalo. That was true, definitely true in Baltimore. So where is this narrative coming from that, oh, well, they had this balanced guy, but all he wants to do is run the ball. Yeah, that's what they hired him to do because that's what he was specializing in. In 2018, Greg Roman was the assistant head coach, but he was also a tight ends coach, right? So that might explain as to why they took such care in the position in order to grab guys like Mark Andrews, in order to grab guys like Aiden Hurst, in order to grab guys like Isaiah Likely. Maybe that's where their priorities lie. Maybe that's because they didn't really care about having a wide receiver because they didn't even pass the ball. Greg Roman, in his 10 years as an offensive coordinator, 7 times he was ranked in the 30s in passing attempts. The one time in which he was actually top 10 somehow was in 2021 with the Ravens, obviously. They went 8-9 that year. So when they try to change it up and when they try to make Lamar a passer, the one year in which he actually committed to it still didn't work. You may be saying, well, that was also the year where they had the aforementioned Tyler Huntley. They had the aforementioned RG3 in order to start games. Yeah, but that wasn't all of it. Lamar was still responsible for at least over 10 games. The one time they started throwing the ball, they couldn't win. But he's supposed to head over here and try to take advantage of having Drake London and Kyle Pitts and now Jonnu Smith and now Mac Hollins and now Scotty Miller and now all these other people that we're trying to get. But if you really wanted that trio to work, then maybe you would consider training him up to be more of a passer than you were training him up to more be a running threat the past 5 years. So we could say this. We could say that he's got no weapons, but that wasn't true because they didn't really have a need for all those weapons. Like I said, the one guy that was leading the league and didn't lead the league, but he led the team in rushing was Mark Ingram back in 2019. He had the 1,200. He had more than 1,200 yards. He's the one that had like 15 touchdowns or whatever, at least 12, like over 10. Lamar only had 7 that year. He also had 9 fumbles that year. So, and then I'm going to take this moment to kind of address some of the people, right? Some of the most common complaints, right? And I don't like the fact that these are the common complaints, but one thing that I've been hearing more recently is that, oh, we're holding another black man down. Okay? You know, it may not look like it, but it definitely doesn't look like it for Mike McDaniel. So if he gets the pass that he's half black, I can definitely get the pass that I'm half black. Okay. All right. And I know I'm half black because the other half of me left with my father. So let's talk about this entire thing, right? If you want to say that we're quote unquote holding another black man down, then I got to give you the other perspective here. Because what actually would be holding another black man down is all of those people, all of these future guys, the future quarterbacks, basically the next wave of quarterbacks, the people that are always saying that, hey, well, this is the premium position to have right now. If you are a mobile guy, like now is the time more than ever in order to start using your mobility to your advantage, right? We need more scramble. We need more running quarterbacks like that because they lead to success, right? You want to take those accounts. And all those players that are training up to be the next Lamar, all those other people that are watching, waiting, because this affects their contracts too. If you're another guy, if you're a younger guy that has that mobility, that is also a black running quarterback, you would have to pay attention to this Lamar situation more than everyone. Because if you continue growing up to live down this path and you start to see that, oh, hey, this is another instance of another black guy in the NFL that wants to show off and say like, hey, where's my money? The NFL is going to start recognizing that as a trend, because this is not the only time in which we've had someone else that wanted to come out and start pointing the finger at every single person but himself. Remember Kaepernick? By the time he lost his relevancy, what did he want to point to? He wanted to point to literally everybody else. He didn't even stay inside the realm of the NFL when he started mentioning police brutality. What did that have the fact that you had a losing record, huh? That didn't affect your mindset. So I don't want to hear that. I want to hear your on the field stuff. I want to hear why you started losing and why you started losing so bad and why you started to get in this mindset that it was everyone else's fault. Because they see that, and they see that example, and how he's not even in the league. He hasn't been in the league since 2016. Last I remember him, he was wearing a Fidel Castro shirt in Miami. And then they see another trend and be like, hey, now we have Deshaun Watson here. Now we have all the problems that he's asking for, and what are his negotiations? What to think about him? And now we have Lamar, and he's asking the same thing. It starts to become too much of a problem, right? And these guys were after these guys role modeled another people, right? Like Anthony Richardson or whatever. Like, oh, it was freaking, I think it was CJ Stroud or whatever. Like, he wanted to say that, hey, I looked up to Deshaun Watson growing up. I looked up to Michael Vick growing up. Right? Like, these are the molds, and even these people had problems in the past. And Michael Vick is another example of a guy that got his money, that got a 10-year, $100 million contract, the biggest contract in NFL history up to that point, and didn't live up to it. It's a trend. The NFL is noticing a trend that when they start seeing all these people, and all these people are influencing each other, and they all have a similar problem, it's like, what the heck? What am I supposed to do there? So when you're the next wave of quarterbacks, and the one person that I know is actually like playing high school football as a quarterback is Trey. Right? Like, what's going to happen to him if he starts having this mentality that it's okay to look up to Lamar, it's okay to justify his actions because he's black? And that when you grow up and you start taking care of your own family, you start being the man of the household, it's okay to act this way in front of everyone because you're black. You're invincible. You're untouchable. You're supposed to have the same kind of privilege as the white man, right? Not knowing, not realizing that the NFL does not have that problem right now. Top 5 highest paid quarterbacks, right? Number 1, Patrick Mahomes, another black guy. Right? Now you got Kyler Murray up in that race. Now you got Russell Wilson up in that race. Now you got Deshaun Watson up in that category. Then you're going to get a lot more people up in that category. Soon to be Jalen Hurts, right? Like, you're going to start to get this issue evolve into a bigger problem, because now that's most of the league. And you're not setting a good example, all because of what? Doesn't have to do with race. It has to do with business. And the business side of this, Lamar, is that you're not willing to sacrifice your own power. You're not willing to sacrifice your own ego if it meant that you could continue to do what you loved. See, like I said, I mentioned that business story of mine because I was paid $10.50 an hour to do what I wanted to do. It wasn't about the money. It was about loving what I wanted to do. It was about doing what I was passionate about. And he doesn't want to suck up to that. He's the one that wants to say no to them. And we know what happens, right? We know what happens when you start saying no to other people and you still want other people to look at your example, to look at your previous transaction and be like, hey, look at him. You said no to the Ravens for 2.5 years. Why would I want to work with you? This is why it's not just the Falcons that are turning him down. This is why the other teams, right? You heard about the Joe Douglas. You heard about Robert Kraft. You heard about all these other, like Jim Irsay. You heard about all these other GMs and these owners and these coaches. They had all their opinions, but no, they wanted to look at what Arthur Blank said. They wanted to look at what the owner of the Falcons said, because whoa, you guys have Desmond Ridder, right? Oh, he's an unproven commodity. Meanwhile, you got the Commanders that want to go to Jacoby Brissett and Sam Howell and not say the same thing to them. I don't know. Maybe a pairing with Lamar Jackson and Eric Bieniemy would have been pretty cool. But no, you don't want to focus that. You don't want to shift your focus there. You want to shift your focus on what Arthur Blank said. And everything that Arthur Blank said, yeah, it was his opinion, but it was based on truth. And you don't like that, do you? You don't like the fact that he does have injury problems. You don't like the fact that every game does matter in the NFL. Oh, my God. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that I only have 17 games to play, that I'm only guaranteed to play? And if you want to start saying that, oh, well, he didn't know if he was going to get injured the next time he was out the field, that literally happens to everyone. And yet people with practice squad money are still out there because they do what they love. They were able to sacrifice their own power and their own ego, and it didn't become a sacrifice anymore because they got to reap the rewards from that. And their rewards was playing in the freaking NFL. Where only the 1% of the 1% go. And Lamar, you know that you're at the tip of the spear. You know you're right up there with everyone else in terms of athleticism. And that's what your leverage is. But you don't have the leverage in the fact that you don't want to give up your power. You don't want to give up your ego. You don't want to sign an agent. You don't want to do this. You don't want to lower your price down. You don't want to sign the contract that the Ravens gave you, which was heavily incentivized. So, yeah, Arthur Blank said it rang true. It's going to continue to ring true. And that's going to be the biggest problem about it. But no, people don't want to listen. People, they just don't want to accept the fact that it's a preference at the end of the day. That's all this has been. It's been nothing but a preference. I prefer to build my roster with Desmond Ridder because that's what we drafted him for a year ago. We didn't have the money at the time in order to consider other options. So even if you wanted to throw other names under the bus for us, like Deshaun Watson, that he dragged us into the conversation for the umpteenth time that we've had to say that. But no, you want to go ahead and make it all about us. And you want to make diss tracks. You want to make all this other statements. You want to be all up in your feelings, right? Which is kind of crazy how a lot of guys, it's kind of a taboo subject for them to be up in their feelings about their own feelings. But then when it comes to someone else that they got no correlation with, some of these people aren't even Ravens fans. And yet they're trying to ship them off to other people. Let it be their problem. So, yeah, I just can't deal with that, man. We just can't. Okay. And then this last thing, here's the kicker, right? Like, oh, well, it was just a preference, right? Oh, well, you hate him, right? Oh, well, oh, man, I hate him so much, right? I didn't care about this entire situation until it got to January. I had no reason to care about this because I root for this team. I don't root for the Ravens. And I say that probably admitting that, hey, if I had to choose a favorite team in the AFC, it might have been the Ravens. And it wouldn't have been Lamar. It would have been, hey, these guys are historically known to have a great defense. But no, we want to go ahead and we want to make it all about other people. We want to start making it about this and, oh, well, what have you done for me lately? But they don't like the fact that I can sit here and say, well, what have you got to say about this, Lamar? Or should I say Lamarcus Mariota? Take a good look at the screen. Take a good look at that. All those numbers that are so close to each other. Some of them actually in favor of Marcus. This was last year, by the way, guys. This was his final year to prove himself. This was his contract year to be like, hey, I'm worth more than just a franchise tag. I'm worth all this money. And then there you go, putting it on the field, right, where everyone can see all your passing attributes, the people that the quarterback position actually matters most, you're Marcus Mariota. The backup for the Eagles right now. I'm not making any of this stuff up, guys. There's nothing to make up. And sure, I can be a little bit aggressive. I can be a little bit ridiculous when it comes to how I say certain things, but this all based in truth, guys. It's all based in truth. I gave you the stats. I gave you everything that was meant to be his preferred year, his year of dominance. And it was more mid than I was able to recognize at first glance. And this was his year to be like, hey, I'm the guy. I should be among the top, right? Not realizing that Patrick Mahomes already won his second Super Bowl. And even he sacrificed his own ego and his own power and got a team-friendlier deal. All of the knowledge is there, Lamar. You just got to learn your lesson. That's all you got to do. Been talking to you guys for 50 minutes, saying nothing but just learn your lesson. Even someone like me, a chump that's barely got like 100 subscribers, probably doesn't even have that much right now. And yet I am able to recognize that. I don't even have a chance to make it to the NFL. I'm never going to have that chance. My chance was ruined back when I was 15. Now I got the lung capacity of a freaking deflated wet air balloon. Thanks to pneumonia, thanks to bronchitis, thanks to COVID. I don't have the lung capacity. There's a reason as to why I'm freaking sweating right now. And all I've just been doing here is standing and talking. Just learn your lesson, Lamar. That's all there is to it. You might have to suck it up a little bit. You might have to come to terms with your mom and be like, oh, I'm sorry, Mom, but maybe, just maybe, we'll only make $45 million this year. And maybe after that, maybe we can make $55 million the next year and have it all guaranteed, have to go all in these separate accounts by any means necessary. If something were to happen to one of your owners, you can still get all that money that you want. Sure, there could be some nuanced tricks of the trade when it comes to the contract negotiations. I've seen the Brett Coleman video. Come on now. As far as you can tell, that's all I've been doing this entire time was just researching and ranting. But it didn't take me all that long in order to understand that, hey, maybe you just got to suck it up a little bit. Maybe you just got to get out of your own head, get out of your own feelings. Start thinking about a team for once. Sign that contract with the Ravens. Go ahead and do that because now you're causing so much of a risk for other teams, right? Now they're scared because of what happened to us the previous year. It didn't matter that Matt Ryan fell off a cliff back when he went over in Indy. right? And I'm a Matt Ryan fan. I can admit that. He was still good. He had his own moments, but still, he fell off a cliff. We weren't expecting that. But how did that happen? What was the cause and effect there? It's because our name got dragged into Lamar or into the Deshaun Watson conversations. Matt Ryan started recognizing that and be like, hey, well, if that's the direction you guys are going, give me the right, after being here for 14 years, give me the right to say where I want to go. So we had to do that. Okay? And this is why I say it for about like 15 years and stuff right now, because here's my analogy. Here's my last analogy, and it's going to be for you guys fans, right? Because specifically talking about the Falcons fans, of course, and I should have put air quotes around that term, but any particular reason why I think that you guys are pretty similar to a chocolate cake? Not because I'm hungry for one. Like my fat self still can't handle that right now, but here's what happens, right? Here's something else that you guys may not want to admit. You see, back in 2001, all the way back into 2006, you guys were able to enjoy a wonderful, delicious chocolate cake to go with your meal. And oh my goodness, that chocolate cake was phenomenal. It was generational. It was so much better than we could have expected. What happened the following year? Well, chocolate cake was gone. And all that time, some of you guys have just been cleansing your palate and just refreshing it and resetting your taste buds to the point where now you would only eat if it was another chocolate cake. And some of you guys are so desperate, right? Like what happens to a person when they stop eating and they start going desperate in their body for a couple of hours or a couple of days even, right? If you want to talk about desperate, right? Some of them, they haven't even eaten that long ago. And they're still over dramatic. Some of them are going to be like, oh my gosh, we're going to die if we don't eat something like now. And oh my goodness, what would go so well after me and for not eating is just one more chocolate cake to make me feel good. Not realizing that you've been starving yourself. You've been refusing to eat what was been on your plate. You've just been skipping your breakfast, your lunch, your dinners for 14, 15, dare I say, years. Because all you've wanted was that chocolate cake. And now you're starting to see people walking by, and some of them have a chocolate cake in their hands. Some of them are like, oh, hey, they're leaning down and they're showing you, they're giving you a chocolate cake right there on a silver platter. And now you're saying to me that other people are rejecting this offer? Well, what? It's 15 years since we've had a chocolate cake. I want another one. That is the only thing that I've conditioned myself to eat. I'm sorry, but you guys are doing this to yourselves. You guys want to treating it like it's so over dramatic that like, oh my gosh, if we don't get another black quarterback, we're going to suck forever. You're going to be all over dramatic and so desperate, and you're going to be like, you're going to say all these things that you probably don't even mean, but you're just going to be like, oh, well, if my Falcons don't do this, then they're going to suck forever, and no one's going to ever go to their games, and all their ticket sales are going to be empty, and no one's going to buy their jerseys, and no one's going to have all that. It don't matter. Because all this time you've been doing this and you've been ignoring all the other food that's been on your palate. All this other food that would have been right under your nose, right in your stomach for you to just enjoy just a little bit. You don't even want to go that far. So some of you people have just been refusing to eat. Some of you have just been refusing to enjoy the Falcons product. You'd be like, well, I was a ticket holder. Yeah, I've had reservations for this chocolate cake for so long. And now that I got like a freaking peanut butter cake from last year, a Hawaiian cake last year, I guess it was a little different from the vanilla cake that we've been getting. But no, I wanted a chocolate one. and you're going to cry and you're going to do it again. And then there's going to be another person with another chocolate cake coming out of the draft that you want. Cycle's not going to end until you start realizing that, hey, there's been food under my mouth for so long. So that's my advice to you guys. Okay? I've already been at this for an hour. As you can tell, my voice is starting to die. But that was my rant. I didn't want anyone else to infiltrate it. Okay? So now I'm going to take this off the ticker, and I'm going to start taking a look at what happened in the comments. Okay? Let's go ahead over here. We've been having King Kale, D. Coleman, Kenny, we had Eric, we had JB, we had Nathan, all these people. Michael, the flamethrower, all these people. Yusuke, all these people here. Congratulations for sticking around this long for about an hour. This was kind of impromptu, but this was like I wanted to make sure that I actually spent my time with this. It's out of my system. I'm not talking about this ever. Okay? Because Lamar ain't going to touch the Falcons jersey. That's been promised. That's been guaranteed. So do the right thing, Lamar. Suck it up just a little bit, just for another year. And enjoy being in the NFL for another year. Some of these people don't have that privilege, okay? Some of these people will have their careers ended shorter. Some of these people will have their lives put on pause, like Damar Hamlin. You know what he was making? I don't even think he was making I don't even think he was making $1 million when that hit happened. But he had a foundation. He was giving back to his community. Community gave back to him in more ways than one. And what are these other people doing? They're so concerned about another person that's getting their money. Money that, I mean, goodness gracious, what the heck? Like, what do you think Lamar Jackson would do if he got my paycheck at $10.50 an hour? What do you think he'd be doing? Would you think that he would be upset a little bit? That he'd be like, what do you think? You think I'm worth this? I'm only 2 years younger than you. I'm only 3 years younger than you, Lamar. Even I know business like this. Start learning your lesson. You can't out-talent business in the NFL, dude. You can't think that you're so special that you go over everyone else's rules, that we're supposed to suck up to you. No, dude. Shield's always going to think Shield first. And meanwhile, we're going to have another stream pretty soon. I'm talking with Wolf pretty soon. We exchanged numbers. We exchanged some information. And I thought about doing this on his stream, right? But I didn't think that it was going to take me an hour in order to get all this out of my system. Thought that I can be a little faster about this. But yeah, after this, since you guys are still here, go over to Wolf or Wolf Day 1 A1. That's his channel. Some of you guys already know. But we're going to start another stream on Saturday. And it's actually going to be about wrestling, which kind of a little bit out of my element there. But I did buy the new WWE 2K23 game. That was my first WWE game that I got, or at least got my hands on since like 2010. I haven't really watched the WWE since 2011, but I think what we're going to have to do for that stream is that we're going to have to do like an Ask Us Anything about the topic of wrestling. That way we can kind of have our own little discussion, end it a little bit peacefully, or whatever the case may be. You can ask us some questions about there. So if you really have that kind of interest in this, then you can go onto his channel most likely, or unless if I can do it. But yeah, but I think I just showed off my promo skills. See, that's what happens when you start doing this public speaking. That's what happens when you start doing this YouTubing for a couple of years. Is that you're no longer afraid of the camera. You're no longer afraid if there's like a bunch of people watching. Sometimes when you're in my situation, you're afraid if there's absolutely nobody watching. So it's actually better to have actual people, kind of tuning in for us. So go ahead and tune in for him. He's got a couple hundred more subscribers than I do. So we're going to bump that up. But, whew. All right. Let's just get this to stop happening. I'm out. Like, go ahead and have yourself a good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever it is you tune in, all that kind of stuff that I normally say at the beginning. But nah, this is the professor stream. So go ahead and get out of here now.